Hey, we're back. We got the tunes. We're jumping around. We're ready for one more week of Rice football. I am Matthew Bartlett, and managing editor at The Roost, joined as always with JP Heath, voice of the Owls. We're here to do a couple things. We're going to hit on USF and that game, maybe talk a little bit about JT Daniels for better or for worse, and then kind of spin ahead and look forward at East Carolina. First, JP, a question. Let you redeem yourself for your geographical. I didn't prep you for this or anything. So
Okay.
This is off the cuff.
Always
What
scary.
state is East Carolina in?
Well, to
What do you think?
paraphrase,
What state?
I definitely know it is in the eastern section of North Carolina because I know that because I've been there
There
before.
we go.
I had not been to the Tampa area before. We know it's Tampa now. It's Tampa is where the Owls fell at USF. But yeah, looking forward to going back. I've never called a game at ECU for football. This will be my first game calling them at home for football, but a couple basketball games and had a good rivalry really going there in Conference USA before they went to the American where Rice is now in. But I know that's not news to you. So yeah, North Carolina.
Well, it's the old and new, right? We have the CUSA, 3.0, 4.0, whatever this conference is at this point, along with we'll bounce back a little bit, talk about beginning of the American, talk about USF. You know, there were days when we were just looking for a Rice quarterback to be able to throw for 300 yards on a semi-regular basis over the past couple years. JT Daniels does it in a little bit shorter than 3/4 and gets hurt. And man, I'm not going to say that Rice is going to win the game if JT doesn't go down, but he was playing so well, man. That my general takeaway from USF is, man, what a missed opportunity that came. It felt so much closer maybe than that final score indicated. What do you think?
Yeah, you hit on it. I said live, and you're nice enough to pay us with the clicks on the broadcast. You might have heard Nate and I talk about this. Rice did not lose that game because JT Daniels went out. It was something that Coach Bloomgren said, which his opinion matters 10 out of 10 times, 100 out of 100 times. But we said it at the time. Hey, Rice could not handle that tempo. That's what hurt them in that game, giving up these 7 passes over 35, 40 yards. That's what ended up being the nail in the coffin, so to speak. And yeah, he's a friggin' magician. The things he does to make people better, it's the hardest thing to do, I've gathered in my years of doing this. And hey, when I was knee high here to grasshopper watching these here sports in the different sports, you don't really see it in baseball too much, of course, but football and basketball, those guys that just make everyone better. He's that dude, JT Daniels. And I know we'll talk more here in just a little bit, but yeah, that was a game where they just couldn't handle the tempo. They knew it would be the issue coming in. 5 lead changes through the first 2.5 quarters, and just giving up the deep ball over the top is what decided that one, not JT's injury, at least in my humble opinion.
Yeah, easy enough for us to say, right? Stop the other team from scoring points and score more points yourself. That's our semi-professional analysis on the
It's a
USF game.
philosophy that works. It works sometimes when you score more points than the other team. That works most of the time.
Yeah, as Bloomgren says, at least one more point, which they weren't able to do against USF. Kind of a bummer, all things considered, with how things were trending going into that game, and now we have the uncertainty surrounding JT Daniels and his injury status. So a couple notes on that. I don't think we need to dwell too much on it, but Bloomgren had his media availability on Tuesday, said JT did not practice Monday. I was out there. I can confirm JT Daniels not throwing a football on Monday, which was a bummer. He seemed pretty optimistic, said that, he was going to try and give it a go on Saturday. We'll see where that trends. Selfish plug atheroost.com. Go subscribe on Patreon. We will have some practice notes out later Thursday talking about the quarterback situation in details, because with injuries like this, it doesn't look like it's going to be a thing where JT's out for the season kind of deal, but it kind of day to day, those the sports cliches that you're just like, you wince when you hear the coach or whoever say them day to day, we'll see. It does kind of feel like that situation with JT Daniels right now. So go subscribe on Patreon. You'll get a bunch of goodies and stuff, and hopefully some more insight later in the week on what the status for JT Daniels is upcoming for Saturday, their first AAC home game. Have you, this is a kind of an aside, have you kind of settled into what's more comfortable to call AAC or the American, or like, are you kind of switching it up when you're doing your introductions of broadcast? Like what's the definitive answer on what we call this new conference?
Get out of my head. I've already messed it up a couple of times. I had $1 or $2 in the jar that was calling it CUSA. So it had happened once, but I think the way they like it is the American at first, and then maybe that's a print versus digital thing that really is different. But yeah, AAC is what I've come to just immediately call it. And on Bordy, who we might take a gander at in a second, I have a place for standings and schedule of games. That's what I like to go to. But then when you're going over ACC games, you're like, okay, well, how about the American? Let's go across the American. So really, now that I've talked myself into this verbal corner, maybe I'll just confuse everyone and call them both. And I think people will know what I'm talking about, which would be a rarity on some people would say in some of the broadcasts.
It's a challenge, man, because I sit there and I'm like, what are people expecting to hear? If I write the American, they'll know. If it's the AAC, what are they looking for?
Hey, let me tell you that whatever you say, I've gotten the feedback. I'm sure you probably get more of it because you're more directly with the social media. They're not going to be happy. People just love to be unhappy at times. But
I'm really good at being wrong, JP. I've made a life out of it.
Hey, we're that's why we're kindred broadcast spirits here.
All right, so kindred broadcast spirits. Let's talk about ECU a little bit. Kind of set the stage. First off, this is not like you mentioned, this is not a new opponent for Rice, as they had a first ever game against USF last weekend. They have 4 games on the docket in their history with ECU. And little note, Rice undefeated at home against ECU. Last game they had at home against ECU was in 2010. They scored 62 points. So
trivia question. Do you know who the OC was in that game? For ECU, not Rice.
Oh, for ECU.
You know the name. You definitely know the name.
I think I might know who you're talking about. I don't have it.
He made a little news a couple off seasons ago going from OU to USC. The Muleshoe, Texas native Lincoln Riley was the OC in that game.
Bad to say.
Yeah, and I heard Rice made a push to learn this during the week. Rice made a push to try to get Lincoln Riley there to come to Rice, but I forget I guess he went from ECU to Texas Tech after that, I do believe.
Man, can you imagine the alternate histories if Lincoln Riley settles down at Rice for a little bit? That'd be fun. We'll see. Not there. Different ships in the night. There's a colloquialism somewhere in there. Just in now. Listen to JP and Matthew try and talk as part of their preview show. But ECU, Rice, no depth chart officially out for ECU. So we've done our best.
You know who's got one?
You know who's got one? Who's got one?
This guy.
We've got one. We've cobbled one together.
Yeah, tell me when you're seeing it. You see the vortex there. You see Bordy now?
We see Bordy. So tell me, when you were putting this together, how do you handle building a Bordy for a offense that is playing 2 quarterbacks? Because that's kind of where ECU finds themselves. I think that the plan going into the season was we'll see who emerges and kind of takes the job. And as of right now, our expectation is we're going to see both of them on Saturday, and there is no QB1. There's two QB1 halves.
Mm-hmm. Well,
You just pick
usually
one.
my color code is the purple background is the starter, the dark color, whatever their predominant color is. So I think I might switch her up or just go both, because we'll see both an equal amount of time. I think Garcia, the big old guy, he's a large human that can get first downs. He's their leading rusher. So usually you see, oh, he's the rushing quarterback and so and so is the pass. No, it's not like this in this case. They both have great athleticism. Garcia has the better rushing numbers, but neither of them is entirely accurate. Garcia's hovering a little bit below 60%, and right at 50% is Flynn. But Coach Bloomgren was giving them their rightful propers. They're both very good athletes back there, and we heard him talk that, hey, we've got to adjust some things guarding against the quarterback run game, when you saw what Byron Brown did against Rice there in Tampa. So that could pose an issue for the Rice defense. How do they guard against that quarterback run game? So I think we'll see more. I don't have any inside knowledge of this yet, but I think Garcia will get the nod. So kind of flip it the way you see it there. Then Flynn will still play a lot, but Coach Houston's a great coach. He'll try to keep Rice off balance. And watching some highlights of the App State game and the Gardner-Webb game that they just played, Garcia had most of the reps in there, but Flynn still came on and had some too. So it's really anybody's guess. I'm sure Coach Houston and the staff know right now, but it's one of those cases where I don't think it matters who starts. It might be a case where whoever gets the hot hand and the good feel, who gets most of the reps.
I just want to pause for a second. That was the most kind, euphemistic way. Neither of them is entirely accurate.
Hey, where is it? What
This is a
kindness is magic. Try to be a kind guy, but it's true. I mean, these are great athletes. When you get down to it,
they're not accurate, folks. They are not accurate passers. And I think that's something, and here's kind of the $1 million question that we take away from the USF game with Byron Brown. I actually think that they did a pretty good job, all things considered, containing him in the run game. He still was able to rush for 80 yards, but it took him a while to get there. One big run where he kind of escaped and made a play, but I kind of feel good about that. The question is, he was, I can think of like one pass in the fourth quarter where he overshot somebody on a long ball to the end zone, but he was so good, like on the money. His throws were dimes. One of his better games. Bloomgren said maybe his best game that he's ever played as a collegiate quarterback, which, you'd love for that not to happen against Rice, but here we are. I think that's going to be something that is really interesting with this matchup, because you have two guys that, can move, and Rice's ability to contain the QB run game is going to be huge. I think they did, reasonably decent job against Donovan Smith at Houston in the past. I know that's kind of been something that has eaten them up, maybe even non-Frank Harris category, but he's made a lot of people look silly that way. But yeah, it's been a challenge. I think they've done pretty good, all things considered, this year. I think it's going to be an interesting mix. And then I wanted to, once we talk quarterbacks, actually, I thought this was a really interesting note on the coaching front. You mentioned Mike Houston being a smart guy. I thought it was very interesting. Bloomgren mentioned this in his presser on Tuesday, that when Bloomgren was actually at Catawba, how do I say this? Catawba College, he recruited. He recruited at the high school where Mike Houston was the head coach. And so this is a relationship that goes back quite a long time, multi-decades, I guess, at this point. So the fact that they met, you always talk about these coaching circles, how there's much more overlap and in connections than you might have thought. So the fact that these two guys, had that relationship so long ago, and now are coaching against each other for the first time, Mike on Mike AAC matchup. I don't know. It's kind of neat. I like interesting storylines. There's a nugget that you can sneak into the broadcast.
Yeah, he told me that Monday at the coaches show, and it's so cool. Everybody knows everybody, and you hit it on the head that we don't get the full story each week. How many of these guys really know everybody else? And I always small talk with just to make sure, like, hey, is there a close relationship? I'll just small talk with Coach Para or with Coach Bloomgren when I don't know an obvious link. And there's inevitably 9 out of 10 Saturdays, it's, yeah, we know this guy who knows this guy. So something like that. And just like in my field, I know most broadcasters that come along in a conference set, in a regional set, just like you're so great at networking, and with Carter on the podcast, how you guys bring in so many great guests, you form those relationships. Life's about relationships, and same thing for Bloom. It's really cool from the nostalgic sense to look back, like, would either of them believe that, hey, in 2023, you're going to be coaching against each other? That's definitely a cool storyline in that. I hope the video stream of this one picks up on that, because it's a really, really cool nugget.
Yeah, I thought that was so cool and so neat. So aside, we'll finish up a little bit on offense. I know Mike Houston, known for a lot of stuff he does on the defensive side of the ball as well. But what's kind of interesting to me, yes, you're zooming in on Rajay Harris. He's been the leading ball carrier for them this year. Oh, look, we got 42 carries, 171 yards, 3 tutties. This has kind of been a running back by committee for the most part from what we've seen from ECU to this point. And man, they have a lot of guys. Mason Garcia, the quarterback we talked about, currently leading the team total yards. You take away some sack yardage, and he's much more higher on that list. But they have a lot of guys averaging 4, 5, 6, 7 yards a carry. So this is one that, for the Owls, as they have, and this is a separate conversation, maybe how Rice has tried to get the running game going. That's one of the things that through 4 games, ECU only 1-3 have that FCS win over Gardner-Webb last weekend. One of the things that has been working for them has been the running game, which, Rice has done a pretty good job of shoring up. It's going to be interesting to see if any of those guys can get hot and get more reps, or if this is something where, man, hopefully they can just cycle through and everybody gets 1 or 2 yards and we call it a day. So that's the running game. O-line, we'll see. It's been kind of a work in progress. A lot of guys have moved around, again, doing our best guess on depth charts here. So we'll see. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting matchup in this one. I think Rice was able to consistently get a good amount of pressure up front last weekend against USF. But when they didn't get home, that was when the problems occurred. So are we going to see, how is the adjustment, the chess match, if you will, that Brian Smith comes in this week, and what adjustments they make to make sure that they can get the best of their rush and coverage? What else do we got on the ECU offensive side of the ball?
Well, like you said a few minutes ago, they don't have the big deep threat because at least on paper, the accuracy hasn't been there, but they've got a former teammate at JT Daniels at Georgia. They won a natty a couple years back. Jari Patterson, Jalen Johnson has been their leading receiver as far as number of reception and yards. And don't pay attention, he did not go to Wagner. Silly JP did not update. So you're getting on the fly editing there. Of
you have the USF guy. He went to Wagner. Is that right?
Hey, yeah, that's one of my secrets there. I used the charts from the last week and edit over them. But
I was paying attention. I did my homework.
It, yeah. But they don't have a lot of the big gaudy numbers from the receiving side, obviously, because it matches up. But they still have some very capable athletes and some veteran guys out there. So I caution Rice fans to think, well, last week they hit them deep because of the tempo. So it won't happen this week because that. Well, A plus B does not equal C in this game all the time. They still have some speedsters. And now that that's on tape against USF, I'd wonder, I don't think there's a Naheem Simmons game. Knock on this wooden desk here, humble brag, in the studio.
Second
But
highest in the history of the American Conference, so I hope not.
exactly. So that probably won't happen as I raise my pitch to try to make a point, but that doesn't mean that they won't try to test it deep. But yeah, there's Harris, Calhoun, a guy that was at Media Day. Remember, we talked to him Media Day. Great, great young man. He was really, really funny as we talked some Texas, North Carolina barbecue trash. But on the stats side, I didn't break it down with the rankings, but they're a +1 turnover team. I know we're about to talk defense, but pretty balanced on the total yardage. They just don't have the volume of yards, and their offense hasn't really clicked getting it going yet. Again, knocking on wood. And they've averaged less than 4 yards per rush, but they average a little more passing per game than rushing. And they've scuffled staying on the field, extending drives, as they've only had a 36% third down completion rate. But those are the other big things on the offense, Matthew.
Well, I want to add one more as we kind of flip the script and transition to defense. You talked about turnovers. I get to fit that into whichever side of the ball I want because both apply. They were going into their game this past weekend against Gardner Webb -4 in turnover margin against non-FCS teams, and then went +5 this weekend against Gardner Webb. So you don't get to take out games. Rice wants to keep their statistics and stuff in from the Texas Southern game. You know, some of them may be from Texas they'd like to take out. That's not how it works. But I will say that against teams on a more comparable playing level, this is a team that has both quarterbacks have struggled completing passes. A, we talked about that, and B, throwing it to the right team. Like they both have multiple interceptions, 6 interceptions between them on the year so far. So this is one where, you know, we're talking about X factors, things to win the game. Man, it's been a minute since Rice has gotten a big plus turnover day. They won the turnover battle against Texas Southern, won that game. But man, if you can get an interception, a fumble, something like that, you end up +2 in the turnover margin. You want to talk about putting pressure on an offense that has not been consistent this year. That's kind of the recipe. So no secret sauce here, but it would certainly help. So that's kind of where we stand on offense. Going to defense, Mike Houston's kind of bread and butter. Got a lot of guys here. Bordy's gone, so I'll make do on the fly.
I get it, man. Get off my back here. Get off my back.
I know. But I will say they have 2 guys, and aggregate tackle numbers aren't always indicative of where things will go. It's different with how, you know, the opponents you've played and how you kind of set up your defense, how good your defense is up front. There's a lot of things that go into that. But Michael Edwards, Julius Wood, both at 30 tackles through 4 games, and that is a good amount. The big guys in the middle going to do a lot of work for the ECU defense. Yeah, here we go. What else do we got in the middle? Anything that through your early work has concerned you or might keep you up at night with this defense?
Well, obviously, utmost respect, but they only have the 1 pick. Can't throw stones. Rice only has the 1 pick defensively this year. Antoine Jackson, a freshman, had to pick 6 at App State. So they haven't gotten those types of turnovers. But Revel there, talented corner. He's getting behind the line, and he returned a fumble for a TD at App State. And they just do a really good job of taking the ball away. Yes, a lot of those stats came last week against Gardner Webb, but that philosophy of theirs is to rip it away. That's the first thing when I asked Coach Bloomgren about that Monday night on his show, that, hey, what stands out about, I think I left it very open, what stands out about Coach Houston's team is that they get after you defensively. So ball security is going to be the big key in this one. But Edwards, Georgia Southern transfer, gets behind the line a lot, but they rotate a lot of guys there in the secondary. And some of the second and third teamers are kind of best guesstimate mixed in there off the dead eye. So don't hold it. It's not gospel out there. But yeah, they don't have as big of a defensive front from a weight size, but they make up for it. They're very athletic there on the defensive line. And Jeremy Lewis was the other guy that we talked to there in media day. I'm going to pull some sound and play that on the broadcast. Another great representation of the ECU players, but their DC is, hey, look, I'm at 100% power there. Their DC is Blake Harrell in his 4th season, previous stops at Kennesaw State and the Citadel. So Owls have to, hopefully it will be JT out there, a quarterback, but they have got to try to establish some of that run. But then we heard Coach Bloomgren say during the week that, hey, if it's 20-80, if it's 30-70, as far as run to pass, I'm okay. Yards are yards. And I was happy Nate and I discussed some of that too when Rice only had the 1 rushing yard against USF. But Coach Bloomgren talked about having to run in certain situations. So maybe I'll amend my comment from 27 seconds ago. Hey, instead of having to run the football, when you really need to run the football, can you do it? And we saw that even against USF, as much as we didn't like the outcome, that they got it in 4th and short situations. They're really good in those, especially they've been really good this year inside the red zone, running the football when they had to, whether it's a close 4th down or getting a Dalen Alexander touchdown, jumping around the pile, or a short pass like we saw the previous game. So, yeah, football's fun. I don't know where to go from there. I kind of ended abruptly but
sometimes, well, you did say one thing that I kind of wanted to hit on, which I think is interesting and something for us to, I don't know if it's a talking point each week, but it's something for us to monitor going forward, because Bloomberg mentioned this week, he mentioned it to a little bit to me after the game on Saturday, and he's talked about balance and running the ball. And he kind of, he doubled down and he said, in years past, like I was a lot more committed to being balanced on like a numbers perspective. Like I want to run the ball half the time. I want to pass the ball half the time. And, his evolution to saying, I don't care anymore, to the extent that if we're weighted 70-30 pass rush or 70-30, 30-70, flip them around. He said, I want to be able to do both when I need to. And this is something that we don't talk about a lot. Maybe this is a philosophical question, but the growth and development we talk about the growth and development of players all the time. I think we see that with JT Daniels right now. He looks like a guy who's been playing college football for 15 years. He jokes, but you can see it's a mature guy. It's a guy who is able to make plays that, oftentimes true freshmen, 1st year, 2nd year guys just haven't had the experience or the muscle memory or the reps to get there. I think we're seeing and have seen an evolution in Mike Bloomgren and the way that he coaches a game in 2023, in a lot of respects, looks different from how he might have approached things in 2018, when he's first getting his feet wet and understanding things. So I don't know if there's a big takeaway from that, but it's something I noticed. I thought it was something worth pulling out. And as we see this team kind of evolve from week to week and season to season under Mike Bloomgren, do we see Mike Bloomgren evolve? And with that, as he grows and the team grows, do we kind of see them take the next step? I think this game is an opportunity, and in no means, like, the USF game is not a referendum one way or another, nor should be the ECU game. But, as we kind of see that growth, can we see a team, regardless of quarterback situation, dust themselves off, get up the mat, and find a way to win against a team? I don't know how much we care about sports books and what odds makers think, but, most people are putting Rice as a favorite in this one at home. So that's kind of something I'm interested in seeing. Can they find a way to win against a team that, beatable means whatever you want it to mean, right? But I think it's a game that no one should be surprised if they win, because I think they have the horses and the capability and the understanding to do so. It's going to come down to, like you said, what does that defense look like? What's the quarterback situation? Can they find a way to get it done?
100%. And rounding out with what you said about Coach Bloom, echoing that, is that the offensive line still has to perform better. He talked about some one-on-ones, and the offense
play Servin potentially coming back this weekend. That's the plan as of right now.
Yeah, I think getting Clay back and just doing a better job on the interior against the ECU defensive line. That'll be a big, big factor, and not necessarily rushing for 200 yards, but showing some signs of life there.
I'd be okay with that.
Game, yeah.
200. If we're throwing out requests, I'd love a 200 yard Dean Connors game.
How cool is he, though? That was cool hearing from him, talking about watching himself on the Jumbotron with that 80-yard reception. Coach Bloom saying, I'm going to start calling him a receiving back there. He said, I never knew how guys could watch them in the Jumbotron. And then I thought of it while I was going there. And they're at an NFL stadium that has the big Jumbotron both ends. And Dean was describing, I was talking to my dad after the game. I was like, man, that was really bizarre. It helped me cut away from the DB for the Bulls that was chasing me. Very, very cool.
Like your rear view mirror as you go off and scamper for the longest Rice touchdown of the year. Yeah, we'll see. I'm sure the receivers would like to get back in front of him on that. It'll be fun. We'll pay attention to what's going on. As we head out of here, go check on patreon.com/atTheRoost. We'll have some practice notes for you. Listen to JP, watch JP in the booth. Maybe we have another vicious celebration where you're having to duck and dodge around Mr. Schlager or somebody else. We'll see. We're hoping for a good one. We will be here back next week, rain or shine, whatever 100-degree temperature I'm sure we're facing in October, to talk about the next one. But until then, thank you all for joining with us, watching with us, listening to us. We'll see you again. Rice Fight.
Never dies, baby. Never dies. We're in Houston this weekend. Houston. That's in Texas. By the way, Texas barbecue rules. North Carolina folks watching this, come get some real barbecue here in anywhere in the great state of Texas. Our worst barbecue, better than your best. Boom. Oh, if I could drop this mic here, I would.
JP's buying.
How's that for an ender? All right, Matthew. See you, brother.